Great, thank you. Okay, I was just going to ask about the recording because I didn't see that little button in the corner. So hi, welcome everyone. In general, I do webinars every first and third week of the month on building healthier relationships, healthier relationship dynamics. Today, I'm going to be covering the topic of how to feel safe again in your relationship, and kind of walk you through and get the wheels turning in your head about how you can start feeling safe again in or out of your relationship, quite frankly. Because we often cover the subject of betrayal trauma, which is the trauma of being betrayed by a loved one. So maybe uncovering an unknown addiction, infidelity, or deep emotional and physical abuse, which is also betrayal, because there's this idea that your partner will make you a priority. He or she will be honest with you, will not manipulate you, will, and that is someone you can trust and be intimate with. And so any of those things happening or surfacing in your relationship is a trauma. So let's talk about a little bit more. So before I can explain about why you need to feel safe again, I'd like you to understand what might be going on within your own body, in your own physiological self, by experiencing betrayal trauma. So trauma is very generally defined as anything that might overwhelm your nervous system. A couple more details might be that it's anything that happens in your life that just catches you off guard, something that you are not prepared for, nor do you know how to handle. It can make you feel scared or helpless. It can definitely make you feel shameful. And there's this thought that you might not make it through. And there is a definite real or perceived threat of your life, of somebody else's life, of your world, of your safety in general. In relational trauma, so the traumas that can occur between, one or another, like a loved one scenario, trauma can also occur from experiencing fear within the relationship, feeling like you're neglected, abandoned, and again, betrayed. So that's where betrayal trauma comes from. I listed some of the symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because again, a lot of people will not quite be able to put their finger on it, but they are feeling very unsettled. The incident of uncovering the addiction, or figuring out or thinking that your partner might be cheating, or experiencing the emotional abuse, that's the stimulus, that's the trauma that occurred in that moment. But clients often describe that they have long-term symptomology, very extended symptoms that go past the stimulus. So, and in betrayal trauma, it's often likened to symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So in general, post-traumatic stress disorder is defined as exposure to death, threatening of death, actual or threatened serious injury, violence, and violence. Now, granted, if you uncover an addiction that you didn't know about, a sex addiction, porn addiction, a substance abuse addiction, overspending, something like that, and experiencing that type of betrayal, that's not necessarily your life being threatened. It's not a gun to your head. But where it definitely parallels that is your lifestyle is threatened. Maybe the safety and security of yourself, your family's security is being threatened. And certainly the world as you know it, where you thought that your partner was trustworthy, that he or she was being honest, that's all shattered. So it can give the feeling of being deeply threatened. Some of the symptoms of PTSD are unwanted and upsetting memories, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional distress after some kind of trigger, a song, someone saying something, being in an environment, going out somewhere, physical reaction, so a physiological kind of fear or heightened intensity vigilance response after some kind of trigger. So you see something on the TV that triggers a memory, and you feel very kind of amped up and anxious. And then your tendency to want to avoid the stimulus. So the restaurant where your partner told you something was going on, you just stay away from the restaurant. People that might know the story, you avoid them because it's a stimulus. Other symptoms are altered mood, such as irritability, aggression, risky or destructive behavior, hypervigilance, startled response, and trouble sleeping. The reason why I'm listing that is because a lot of the people that chime in here and watch these webinars are often displaying those types of symptoms. And sometimes it can really help normalize versus stigmatize that you are indeed in a full crisis trauma response to what's going on in your life. So I want you to understand a little bit too about what's happening in your body. Because again, in order to feel safe, it's not just about setting up boundaries outside around having specific requests and needs from those around you. It's understanding what's going on inside your body and doing what you need to do within yourself to try to keep yourself feeling safe. So Peter Levine, who does somatic experiencing, did a lot of research on the animal process of feeling triggered, threatened, and traumatized, and what goes on hormonally in them. And then kind of related over to human beings. But basically, initially, there's a perceived threat. So let's say animal who is preyed upon senses, let's say a rabbit senses that a coyote is nearby. Or let's just say a mountain lion. And they hear it, they smell it. And so instantly their sympathetic nervous system shoots up and they go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, which since they're small and can't really fight back, they'll probably run into flight, and their heart will go up. It'll shoot with a bunch of cortisol and adrenaline, and it'll get them moving quickly. And, they're not going to think or do anything, but just run away. When that system becomes overloaded because the heart rate is moving so rapidly, they're not getting enough oxygen. It's at that point where the body decides it basically needs to stop or it's going to die. And so it is at that time where the body might release like a natural opiate, which is a pain reliever, to either prepare the animal for death, because maybe they see the mountain lion finally catching up to them. If they perhaps were able to get away and run into a hole somewhere, so they didn't experience death, then they'll transition into violent shaking to discharge all the overstimulation from the sympathetic nervous system. And then the parasympathetic nervous system will kind of downregulate, and your body will shake it out, and then the animal will move on. But most people who study trauma have theorized that basically humans, because it's either regularly we're exposed to a feeling of threat, or we were never allowed to kind of discharge the hormones, process it, move on to the next moment. Some people can get stuck in those different phases, those different stages. So this is a webinar on, now that you understand that you've probably been in a state of trauma and feeling extremely threatened or unsafe. These are steps to try to kind of help you take back some power and start figuring out what you need to do to feel safe again. So the first and most obvious thing is explore, are you still being exposed to that threat? If you're obviously still in an emotionally abusive, physically abusive, your partner is still acting out, has no intention of changing, has expressed no remorse or desire, and you are still exposed to that threat, you're going to stay in crisis mode. Nothing is going to help calm that down. So do continue to explore what kind of stimulus is still around you and what you need to do to start feeling safe again. A part of that is to surround yourself around healthy loved ones and professionals. So mental health professionals who maybe are specialized in betrayal trauma or addiction recovery, healthy family members that aren't going to gaslight you, judge the process, tell you what you should be doing instead of just being supportive of you or compassionate for your situation, or anyone around you that's going to judge and not understand the fact that you're in a very serious crisis. And that means that, everything's aren't going to be roses and cherries and rainbows, and you're going to be in a state of struggle, and they need to be able to tolerate that. Another important thing is developing rules of engagement. So you've uncovered the addiction. You are pretty sure there is an affair happening, or there's been an admittance of an affair, or you've just gone through an abusive situation. What are the rules of engagement from this moment on? Do you only talk about adversarial conflict, high conflict topics in front of professionals? Do you need to take timeouts and breaks? Safety is a major issue, like meaning physical safety. So make sure you're in a safe situation. But also for things like sex addiction or porn addiction or substance abuse addiction or infidelity, there's a huge issue of there's been a lot of lying, a double life going on. And you sometimes need to set up things to allow the betraying partner, so the partner who's been lying and manipulating, to reestablish trust through maybe he or she acquiesces to you having a phone tracker. So you can kind of make sure that he or she's really at work when he or she says she's there. Attending 12-step meeting, I need you to be at one 12-step meeting a day. Do we need to do a trial separation? So I don't want to be in your face or see your face right now, except for in couples sessions. Social media and technology transparency. I know lots of people who've been asked to shut down their Facebook or Instagram accounts. Maybe financial transparency. So if you've been paying for pornography, or money's been going to an affair partner or prostitutes or drugs, that we need to be sharing an account to make sure that I know what's going on in and out. This is really important. What suits one client that will make him or her feel safe during the recovery process is not what suits another. I know clients who, when they're offered the opportunity to track their partner or have full financial transparency, they kind of get this feeling of like, yuck, I don't really want to be tracking you. That doesn't feel right to me. And honestly, I don't really, who knows? You could leave your phone there at your work and say you're at work, but you could be acting out. So that is not a behavior or a thing you could do for me that's going to actually calm my nervous system down and make me feel safer. So it's a really great thing to be exploring in couples therapy, individual sessions with, again, someone who understands betrayal trauma, to really start exploring what elements, what kind of behaviors and things can be set up kind of behaviorally and environmentally that help you feel safer or more able to rebuild trust. So that's a really difficult question. Another thing under that umbrella is sexual safety. Obviously, when there's been some kind of like sexual addiction, infidelity, pornography, any kind of those acting out behaviors, emotional abuse, you might not feel safe to engage in any kind of sexual act or touching of any kind. You may not, I'm not sure, but you have to talk about that in therapy as well. Even if that subject matter is really uncomfortable, maybe get back in touch with what that's feeling like for you. and set up some boundaries around that. It's okay to say, I don't want to touch you, or the only reason why I feel like I want to have sex with you is because I'm afraid you're going to go out and get it somewhere else or run back to the affair partner. So I'm doing it under duress. And then that's a really important thing to be processing. So explore that. You need to be releasing, I'd encourage you to release the shame of maybe how you responded when you found out, when you were in full-blown crisis mode. Sometimes people experience this shame of, oh my God, how did I not know sooner? Why didn't I track him or her? Maybe you got very angry or rageful, or maybe you didn't even feel like you got rageful enough. I know people who feel shame over the fact that they didn't hire a private investigator to follow them around, and that they weren't proactive enough, and they let it happen. Then an issue with betrayal trauma is often when you've chosen to be with this loved one and they are the one who has harmed you. There can often be this shame of like, oh my gosh, how did I choose to be with this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and expose myself to this? A couple more things. Oh, and also this kind of releasing the shame of your response to things. The mantra I use is, that's why I did so much education on the trauma and the physiological parts of trauma, is because I want you to acknowledge that it's happening in your body, that you're in a state of crisis, in a state of trauma. And sometimes this biology, you don't have control of it. The more you're acknowledging it and the more you're understanding its role and what's happening, you can probably downregulate it and calm it down, but you have to have language for understanding what's going on and kind of say, gosh, this is what happens when I'm in a state of like a threatened state. Again, it all goes with the educate on the impact of your trauma to your partner. So again, with a professional who understands betrayal trauma, your partner needs to understand exactly, you're not the crazy person or emotionally unstable, and this all didn't happen because you stopped having sex with him or her, or you were too passive or too angry, or you nagged too much. They have to understand the impact of their poor choices and how they've harmed you and what the consequences of that are going to be. The partner every day has an opportunity to be empathetic or sympathetic of your situation, or you can take 20 steps backward when the partner continues to lie, use abusive language, maybe mock or invalidate your response to what's going on, maybe even further act out, relapse. This is also in the umbrella of, when to do disclosure with someone who's maybe a certified sex addiction therapist and fully understands the whole process of disclosure. Meaning, for those who aren't familiar, it's kind of a very thorough, well-developed with people's individual therapists, but the partner, the betrayed partner, and the addict sit down, and the addict kind of shares a general synopsis of the way he or she's been acting out. But that's a whole other issue. What are the other things? Find a language and understanding to better identify what is going on. This is something that I think is so important. Understanding these concepts of gaslighting, which I've done webinars on, this state of confusion of not really knowing what's up from down. So kind of understanding your trauma physiological response, the chemistry and the hormones that are going on. Those things can enlighten and empower someone so much, not to mention make therapy and engagement with the partner that's the recovering addict just so much more productive, because you have a language to bring it into the room and talk about it. Reclaim parts of yourself, life, joy. So it is very difficult to do in your crisis stage, but further along down the line, explore topics of what does bring you joy. Are there people, things, places that bring me joy outside of this relationship that I really need to work on reincorporating back into my life? Sometimes uncovering an unknown addiction can really make you question your spirituality, and you might need to re-explore that. or it can draw you closer to your spiritual practice. I encourage some kind of, again, when the crisis has calmed down, to heal your kind of high, hypervigilant, traumatized brain with some form of like EMDR, somatic experiencing, meditation, neurofeedback, breath work, dancing, music, Tai Chi, dialectical behavioral therapy. Those are all clinical approaches that have a pretty strong substantiated evidence of being able to kind of calm that trauma, hypervigilant response, so you can get to the next thing that I think is important, which is replugging into your kind of true self, your instincts and intuition, so that you are not, you know, victimized again, that you kind of slow things down, extend the pause button a little bit further, so you can understand what's going on around you, what you're feeling on the inside, process it, vet it. Okay, this stuff's crap. This is based on a really bad way of thinking, but this is really what's going on. So this is how I want to respond to this. That muscle is going to be so weak, especially when you are coming out of a hypervigilant, severely traumatized crisis situation. So that is one of the longest recovery processes in my mind. Also checking in to make sure that your partner is taking his or her own responsibilities in managing the crisis. Is he or she following through with what she or he said that, you know, they were going to do? Change jobs, alter their finances, change their environment, make appointments, seek healthy support systems, 12 steps. And I think two things about what you don't need to do is you don't need to be diagnosed or pathologized to feel safer. You don't need a diagnosis, and you don't need to be told that you have a problem to start feeling safer. And you don't need to immediately go into your family of origin, you know, how your mother not loving you enough, or your dad being emotionally abusive to you when you're growing up. That might be a subject matter that might help you down the road. But that's definitely not something that needs to happen in those moments of crisis and rebuilding safety and security. You know, those things just don't tend to help that much. And that's it.
Thank you, Kristin. Everybody, you can ask questions using the Q&A feature. While you do that, I wanted to highlight a couple of points that Kristin made. First of all, trauma is highly subjective. What's traumatic for me might not be for you. If I'm a race car driver and I get in a fender bender going 10 miles an hour, it's not going to bother me. If I'm a new mother with my baby in the car, a fender bender is going to be really traumatic for me. So, you know, that's an extreme example, but trauma is always subjective. But one of the things that is always traumatic is betrayal trauma. Betrayal within an intimate relationship is deeply traumatic for anyone. They've done research on betrayed partners of sex addicts, and they show signs. Almost all of them will show signs of PTSD. So I'm really glad Kristin talked about that. You know, they probably don't have PTSD because, you know, one of the criteria is it has to last for 6 months or longer. But early, you know, in the immediate aftermath of learning about infidelity, sexual addiction, things like that, it is very, very natural to have these, you know, emotionally labile, up and down, in and out symptoms where you might think you're crazy or you feel crazy. And that's a normal response to betrayal trauma. And I had one other point and I can't remember what it is, so I'll bring it in later. Ask questions via the Q&A feature. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. One of the things about trauma, particularly post-traumatic events, you know, when you get triggered, you know, you can be walking down the street with your partner and you're going along great, and all of a sudden you feel like you just learned about a new episode of cheating, and you may not even know why you feel that way. It could have been somebody you saw out of the corner of your eye, looks like how you picture the affair partner, or, you know, a billboard ad, or anything could trigger these emotions, and you could find yourself rolling out of control with no idea why, which is hard for you and hard for the addict who in the moment hasn't done anything. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate those points. If you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster, that's a normal part of healing.
Yeah, and personally, for something like that, because I know that can feel very frustrating, like for those clients who have had a partner who has been engaging in couples therapy and has, for all intents and purposes, appeared to try to be in recovery, has experienced remorse, etc. There can almost be this extreme disappointment. The quotes I hear all the time is, I don't know when I'm going to get over this. I don't know when I'm going to want him or her to touch me again. I like all of a sudden this rage will blow through me and I'll just see him as this horrible monster again, even though he didn't do anything. And then there'll be this helplessness, this almost like detachment from it. And I've found that EMDR is a really amazing trauma treatment for someone who struggles with that. I just recently
what that is and how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned a lot of my recent webinars as well, but it's an eye movement desensitization and reprocessing system. Quickly say, so these are people who are certified in this particular trauma treatment. So you'll see that they're mental health therapists like I am, but they're EMDR certified. So they do special, very expensive, fancy training to learn how to walk you through these traumas, and the way they do this kind of biofeedback, right left brain stimulus, is how I feel, or how I kind of explain it, helps your brain file away the trauma. So maybe you still have that memory, so you might still see someone that looks like the affair partner, or you might still hear that song that reminds you of that horrible moment, but you don't get that huge physiological response that just kind of feels like it throws you back to step one, and you're just back to feeling so angry and hurt and harmed. And I mean, just as an example, I just have a client recently who'd experienced a rape by a loved one, like a date rape, basically. So someone she kind of trusted and knew. She's been this was something that happened a couple years ago, and randomly while in treatment, after doing a couple weeks of EMDR, so we're not talking long-term EMDR, he called her out of the blue. And she said, Kristin, I can't, like a month ago, if I saw that name on my cell phone, I would be back to like deep depression, deep anxiety, deep isolation because of that trauma. Now I can just like see his name and just click off. And just feel so much more, there's just so much more empowering feelings of feeling so kind of stable and grounded as you're processing the next best choice.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody, I know this is kind of a deep and scary topic, trauma, but if you want to ask questions related to your experience, yeah, please do so. Kristin and I can fill an hour pretty easily, I'm sure. But this is for you, not for us. We're here to help you. Can you talk a little bit more about about the feelings in the body? What do betrayed partners feel when they re-experience betrayal trauma for whatever reason?
Oh man, I mean, it goes back to the same PTSD type trauma physiological responses. I mean, there could just be, driving into a city where you kind of exposed where this happened, or where you knew your partner was acting out. Or even we talked recently about holidays. So maybe there's a birthday party or a Christmas or other holiday event where your partner couldn't come, and you found out that he or she was acting out. Doing that can just send you physically right back to day one, where you're just in this state of helplessness, in this state of shame, in this state of, how could I have not known? Why am I so stupid? How could you be so stupid? How could you do this to me? Even after, like, let's say a year of therapy, you've learned, it's not about me, it's about him and his addiction and him being in his dark place. And, I could have hired 6 private eyes to follow him, but he was, in his tunnel vision of acting out in his addiction, and there was nothing that really could be done at that time. So rational thought gets kind of smeared away by that traumatic crisis physiological response.
We've got a question here. It says, how long to starting to recover after FTD? I don't know what FTD stands for. Can whoever asked that question tell us
full disclosure is what I'm guessing?
Possibly. Ours was August 15th. I'm still struggling. So let's assume it's disclosure, but whoever asked the question can please correct us if we're wrong.
I know. I mean, I'm going to guess it's that. And like I said, all those things that I listed about feeling safe, about what like how much your partner is showing behaviorally and verbally, is showing signs of being a changed person. Yeah, full therapeutic disclosure.
Right.
That helps. How much support you're getting. They also say there's a strong indicator correlation between how much trauma you've experienced in the past, which is, how long you might be kind of stuck in that struggling state. There's so many different facets and pieces that make your story and your recovery process unique. The resources, the support. So for the fact August 15th, I mean, that's pretty recent. They, I think when out of the doghouse, what would Rob say? 18 months is the.
Yeah, Dr. Rob in Out of the Doghouse, he talks about kind of like a year to 18 months before you start getting back to something that approaching normal for you in your relationship. One of the interesting things, and I think he makes this point in Doghouse, is that we all come into our relationships with different levels and degrees of prior trauma, and we have to take each other as we are. So if you've got a whole bunch of trauma in your background, it might take you longer. It might take you less time if you learn to work through your prior trauma. It really depends on the people.
Right. But the things that I was listing are ways definitely all will contribute to a healthier recovery. But that's also your own personal journey. You're not going to have control of what your partner's doing and all that. So that's a big question. Well, speaking of that, I mean, do you want to move to that other chat question?
Is there one?
I'll read it. Yeah. What can the betraying party do to help their betrayed partner deal with the trauma? That's a really great question. First of all, because I think part of your recovery is all about setting up your own boundaries and assessing your own needs. I think that's a really great question for you to be asking yourself first. What do I need from him or her? Some people need a polygraph every week, and following and tracking them on their phone. And, and just the act of the partner who betrayed to say, yeah, sure, I'm surrendering. This is part of me surrendering that, I have a problem and I want to rebuild trust. So whatever you ask me to do, I will acquiesce to. I'll kind of humble myself to that. But generally speaking, it's often understanding that, these weren't just choices that I made, to have these were just like, I decided to, have a sex addiction, or I decided to act out with porn, or I started to use substances, or I had a single affair. It's understanding that there's an impact, that their choices have harmed you. And there can be a lot of healing when they're able to demonstrate kind of a calmness and an understanding and a sympathy of like, wow, I've really harmed you. I can see you're really struggling here. And it's making me really sad to know that I'm the one that's contributed to your struggling. That takes a lot of work to be there, but if someone can do that, that can be quite healing. I've even heard that there's something physiologically your chest. So pending if you're feeling safe enough to do this, and you triggered, like you saw something on a billboard or heard a song that you physiologically really struggling, your partner might want to ask, can I hug you right now? Is there something that I can do? Can I hold your hand? Do you need me to just sit and listen? So, explore what would help you feel safe, and then just ask him or her to be doing that in those moments.
And for a partner who's new to recovery, I'm a recovering addict, so that's the end of this that I come from. I had to be told that if you see me having a feeling, ask me what I'm feeling, because you clearly don't know what it is. And then I would have to do that. And over time, I learned how to discern what other people were feeling and to develop some empathy, which as an addict, I just didn't have it. It's not something I learned growing up, and it's certainly not something I learned in addiction. I learned how to not have empathy. You can't behave the way we behave as addicts if you have any empathy for the people around you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a long process. It's up to the betraying partner to re-earn trust and to work really, really hard to develop safety within the relationship, because he or she is the person who kind of destroyed trust and safety, and it does take a lot of time. I would recommend Rob Weiss's book Out of the Doghouse, because it's written for cheating men, but it applies equally to cheating women, and partners also benefit a lot. But it's got a lot of tasks and things that cheating partners can do to rebuild a relationship.
Right.
So send us some more questions.
Does anyone who's out there, can they suggest what they've found help them kind of rebuild some level of trust, or rebuild some kind of feeling of safety or empowerment when you've been so traumatized? Or maybe even what your symptoms are when you kind of feel yourself being triggered or traumatized?
While people formulate that, we got another question in. Someone wants to know about the difference between EMDR and neurofeedback. Good question. Interesting.
What's the difference between EMDR and neurofeedback? Well, I'm not certified in either of them. So with that said, I have done EMDR. Actually, I've done both. I've done EMDR and neurofeedback. So while I cannot break down structurally why work, I have that they both do work. I specifically did EMDR to minimize some PTSD type symptomologies that I was struggling with and some grief and loss issues. And I was blown away with my personal experience. And I've been blown away with other people. I've had many clients that were very highly, let's use the word labile, as Scott said, dysregulated. So very hurt, very rageful, very angry, and kind of swung all around and expressed hopelessness about ever reaching some kind of stability level with those feelings, and finally experiencing them after EMDR. Neurofeedback, God, I feel like I have even less of a language, but it's kind of this. Scott, do you have experience with it? I mean, I can only express my experience with it.
I don't. It's all you.
Yeah, it's been so long, but specifically the story behind that I have for that is, I had a friend who did a neuro system and said, yeah, you come try it out. So, I think I expressed, you have to kind of set some goals of what you're setting out to do when you sit down to do the neuro feedback. So, experience less stress, experience better, more or higher quality sleep, stuff like that. For addiction, it's experiencing, lower urges, less depression, things like that. And I think specifically mine was experiencing less stress, like overwhelming stress rumination. So ruminating thoughts around stress, and better quality sleep. And I feel like I got I mean, I think I did 2 sessions and I already found a difference in the 2 or in after that.
Basically, any trauma treatment is designed for you to, I mean, unfortunately, trauma treatment requires that you re-experience the trauma, but EMDR is an attention distraction task. You're kind of doing something else while you're talking about the trauma, and it reduces its power. Most trauma treatments are talking about it to reduce its power. The more you talk about it, the less power it has. So whatever treatments you're doing, but EMDR is the one that has really proven to work with trauma. I would agree with Kristin on that one. It looks like we have some more things coming in. One of our people says, what has been helping us? He says he is the betrayed partner. This is a gay couple. He's having his partner, the betraying partner, read books out loud to him. They're currently reading Cruise Control, which is a book about sex addiction for gay men. That's kind of a cool suggestion and a way
Absolutely.
to build some intimacy.
And absolutely, because again, it sounds so basic, but it's this, I need this. Can you do this for me? And it seems so simple, but I just have to think of maybe the physiological connection. I'm assuming you guys are reading books out loud, like in a bed or something like that, but maybe you guys just sit next to each other on a couch. Maybe there's some kind of physical proximity to it. But I mean, that's just because that's where I read. But, there's probably many pieces to that can be very healing.
I mean, I'll be honest, one of my secret romantic fantasies is having a partner where we can sit and read the same book, take turns reading out loud, so I love that. Cool. Good for you.
There's a couple other ones. Let's see. I joined a women's group for partners of SA. I have people now I can call 24/7 who understand. This isn't a 12-step group. It's a small group with a therapist. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's actually something physiologically that happens when you talk it out to somebody. There's also something too that I was reading about the parietal lobe. It's a part of your brain, is what senses like boundaries. So it kind of helps your brain realize like, hey, I am me, I'm this separate being, you are you. It falls under the orientation association area. This is from the Essential Living book by Dr. Shelley Uram, U-R-A-M. But as your limbic system calms down, that's where like your trauma and your fight, flight, or freeze happens. The prefrontal cortex, this is where good decision making happens. This is where you like can slow down and think rational thoughts and go, is this real, or is this in my head, or is this a trauma response? So this is your prefrontal cortex. It improves. The blood flow gets stronger there. The oxygen gets stronger there. And the orientation association area, when that all calms down, actually makes you feel more connected to others, is what her book says. And actually can often improve, because these kind of issues, betrayal trauma, obviously if you've been harmed by a loved one, isolating and not connecting to others is often a byproduct to it. And that's often a recovery goal, is to be able to healthily reconnect. So that's interesting to think about. Do you want me to read one of the other comment, the Q&A?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, and he did confirm that they do indeed read in bed before going to sleep. Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Let's see. It says, I have to say that during the past year, when my SA husband was not doing anything positive since I discovered the latest affair, I was in a constant state of hypervigilance. Completely understandable. I bought Dr. Rob Weiss's books, I'm assuming, Out of the Doghouse as a last-ditch effort. I was in my own therapy and researching everything on betrayal trauma. Anyhow, now that he read the book and is in recovery, my hypervigilance has calmed down. Just knowing that he is acknowledging that he has an issue and is working on himself was a big weight off my chest. I agree. It seems almost less like, if you ask your SA or partner after an infidelity, can I track your phone? It seems like it's like less about the tracking the phone part, and it's more about this surrendering of kind of like, I've made bad choices that have harmed you. I need to make efforts to improve trust again. And I'm willing to do this, you know, to sacrifice my privacy, I guess, and my, you know, this is my world, my human body and my choices, and to sacrifice that to rebuild trust for you. There can be something really powerful in that.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of from the addict angle, no addict recovers perfectly. We all have really good days where we do everything right, and then, you know, 3 days later, we do something wrong, and we feel bad about it. You know, a lot of relationships, a lot of counselors will recommend like a 24-hour disclosure rule, like particularly after you've had full therapeutic disclosure, where you know everything, hopefully. You know, if I told you a lie yesterday at 10 p.m. and, you know, I have 24 hours to amend the lie and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't know what, and you get to be mad as the betrayed partner that I lied to you. But you don't get to be mad that it took me 23 hours to come clean. You know, that's kind of a boundary that helps both people. You know, it keeps the focus on, you know, what it is that I did or the lie that I told, rather than on I kept it secret for, you know, 23 hours and 57 minutes and 22 seconds or whatever. But, you know, beyond the 24 hours, boy, you know, you would have the right to get mad at. You know, there are all kinds of safety boundaries that couples can set. Maybe Kristin has more that she uses in her practice.
Well, I mean, the last webinar I did, or 2 webinars ago, were specifically on setting healthy boundaries. So, I mean, I think everyone can kind of review that. But no, I mean, I think that's the empowering part of boundaries, is to really sit with yourself and realize, what kind of physical boundaries do I need to set? What kind of like dependency needs boundaries do I need to set? Where do I need to clean up my side of the street and kind of improve my responses? So meaning, I want the right to say no to a request because maybe I'm not feeling well that day, but maybe I'm not as tolerant when someone else says no and sets a boundary themselves. So is there anything else specifically you were thinking along those lines, Scott, for?
You know, there's just, yeah, Rob lists a bunch of them in Doghouse, and they're not coming to me offhand. That's why I throw it to you. I'm a fish out of water when I'm dealing with partners. I'm the addict. But Kristin does have 2 blogs on boundaries that are on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. So if you want to learn more about boundaries, check out those blogs. And then a woman named Michelle Mays has a blog called Partner Hope, partnerhope.com, and she talks a lot about boundaries in her blog. And I think both Kristin and Michelle do a great job with that. Kristin, what are some things that betrayed partners who aren't feeling safe can do to empower themselves, not only within the relationship, but everywhere, just, you know, life in general?
Oh, I know. That's a really great question. Well, again, I think there needs to be this understanding in this language for knowing that if you are still being exposed to this threat, or your partner is continuing to act out, or you're still in the state of, am I going to stay in my marriage? Am I not? Is this person going to actually pursue recovery, or am I still being lied to? And still in that kind of in between purgatory state where you're not moving down one particular path. Maybe there hasn't been anyone admitted to an affair, but you're in this state where you just know he or she is not in the marriage anymore. I'd encourage you again to be going to a therapist who specializes in betrayal trauma, because again, I find there's a language for all these things that they kind of just like sit and hover around us like a dark rain cloud and just kind of rain on us. And all we know is that we're wet and it's raining and it's dark and we don't know where it came from. We don't know how to get out of it. And we get stuck in this really, really brutal, confusing issue. But a betrayal trauma kind of specialist can, when you're talking about it, oh, you know, I was, my husband came home and he was just like, and he didn't respond to my phone calls all day. And I was like, hey, where have you been? Like, what's going on? Why aren't you answering my phone calls? And his response is like, hey, if you weren't so jealous and angry all the time, then maybe you wouldn't be having issues anymore. A betrayal trauma therapist might be able to say, wow, that kind of sounds like gaslighting. Do you feel like he gaslights you? And that might be not a common term that everyone knows, but that's basically when you try to express a need, a concern. You know, I'm noticing that this is happening. Can we talk about it? And instead of engaging in that conversation, your partner just kind of tells you, that's not your reality. That's not happening. You're crazy for thinking that. And then just kind of wipes it off like it never happened. That's extremely abusive and harming. And once you understand those types of behaviors, you can feel very empowered in the conversation to kind of point it out or get around it. So, you know, understanding the physiology of trauma and what your body might be going through is helpful. So you can put a language to that. And then understanding how words and language for what your partner might be doing.
And one of the ways that betrayed partners can know that the cheating partner is trying and is working is when he or she, instead of responding with, no, you're crazy, they listen and go, tell me more. They say, I'm sorry, tell me more about that. What can I do differently? Then you know your partner's working with you instead of against you.
Yeah. You shift. There's a very big difference between, I haven't heard for, you know, normally on business trips, you call me, and this one, I barely even heard from you. What's going on? And the response is like, God, get off my back. Why are you so up in my business? I'm working for a living. I'm the breadwinner. You're welcome. That's one response. And there's a whole other response and a different person that you're dealing with at that time. When you say, gosh, normally on business trips, you write and you call and you just have been really absent. What's going on? And the person goes, gosh, I didn't know you were experiencing that. I'm sorry. I was just in meeting after meeting after meeting, and it slipped my mind, but my intention was not to, you know, to avoid you or to not call you. And I'm sorry that hurt your feelings. Big difference.
Yeah. It looks like we have one more question here. This is more of a comment. It looks like switching to a betrayal trauma therapist was the best thing I did. Not only that, but the center that we go to works with sex addicts too. That's fairly common. My husband sees a different therapist at the same place. Good. I don't know how Kristin feels about this, but yeah. Dr. Rob always recommends.
Yeah, everyone needs their own safe space.
Partners have their own therapist. Yeah. And the two therapists are able to share notes, which is also good. And we can have a group meeting every few months, which is also good. Yes. You want to comment on that?
No, I asked you guys to tell me things that helped you feel safer. And that particular structure, when I kind of generally open-endedly suggest go find helping professionals that understand this dynamic, you just laid out, I guess, exactly. If I had to create like a utopia for someone dealing with this with helping professionals, that would be it. So I personally think that type of execution is really great. Someone who specializes it. You have your own therapist, he has his own therapist, but they can still talk, so we know there's no secrets or manipulation or lying going on. And then you guys are all still allowed to kind of meet and confer and figure out where to go from there.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. If you're sharing the same therapist, which does happen sometimes, it's really not recommended because the therapist ends up keeping secrets. Mm-hmm. You know, he can't betray one client for another client. It's really awful for the therapist. And it's really awful for the clients. And you would find yourself wondering, what did Joe say to him? And Joe would find himself saying, what did she say to, way better to have your own therapists who can come together, and especially because they're in the same building, they can work together and do a couple session. That is absolutely the best dynamic. So, Kristin, are your fingernails painted for the holidays?
They are. Thanks for noticing.
Can you hold them up close?
There's like some, obviously not with a manicure, it's just with me. So my hands are pretty set.
They've been flashing all day. It looks like we're out of time, everybody. So I want to thank Kristin for leading today's session, everybody for attending, and for all your input. We really enjoy these. Kristin will be back in 2 weeks. Next week at this time, we have Brittany Mangum doing a prodependence session, which is also great for partners. Rob is back in the country at some point today, so he'll be doing his regular Monday evening session if you want to join that one. Anything you want to add, Kristin?
Yeah, I think I'll type my email down here, but I am here for you all. And so please, if there's a subject that you want me to devote the hour to, email me. You know, I'm really struggling over this particular issue. Can you talk about it, provide some educational pieces, give me some suggestions and referrals? That's what I'm here for. So yeah, please, my email's down there in the chat section. Send me an email, give me some suggestions. I do this 2 times a month.
Yeah, and you can also, if you want to reach Kristin, you can also contact us through sectionrelationshiphealing.com. Just go to the contact us button and say, hey, can you relay this information to Kristin, and we'll take care of that for you.
Great.
All right, thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and have a great holiday or holiday season.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Have a good day.